Welcome to Know the Love of Christ.
Hi again. Let's recap last week's episode, which was chapter 4, verse 21 through 34. Jesus continued talking in parables to his followers, and what seemed like two small random parables were really a warning of sorts, I guess you could say. Then we discussed a couple more agriculturally related parables, one of which is only in the book of Mark, and the other is the more well-known mustard seed parable. So today we will continue in chapter 4, starting at verse 35, where Brittany will start our conversation. Pause here and read chapter 4, starting at verse 35 through chapter 5, verse 20. Then start again to join us in the study.
Okay, so we're going to go ahead and jump right into it. So first, through the end of chapter 4, verses 35 through 41, it's all about Jesus calming the storm. And I think I've told y'all several times before, I know that Jesus is fully God, but I so appreciate the human side of him so very much. And so when I started reading, immediately I just thought, you look at verse 35 and it says the evening had come and he said, let's go across to the other side. And so I'm just reading, I'm thinking, all right, how do I put that in today's language? Hey, look, y'all, I'm tired. I've been teaching all day. It's time to get away from folks. Let's retreat. Let's go relax, right? And so Jesus hops in the boat and he's leaving the crowd, and he's just resting when this great windstorm comes. But in the ESV, in verse 38, it says, but he was in the stern, asleep on the cushion. Jesus was relaxing. He was just, he's tired. He's had a long day. I've been teaching people, and then it's just like, I'm teaching all these people, but then if you go back to verse 34, it says that he didn't speak to them without a parable, but privately to his own disciples, he explained everything. And so it's like he's doing double the work. It's just like I'm trying to teach all these people these different parables. I'm trying to explain to them what, these parables, something that they would understand because of what they do, their jobs, and different things like that. And then I'm having to go back and I have to explain everything to my disciples. And rightfully so, because once he leaves, his disciples are going to be the ones that are going to carry on the message, are going to carry on the gospel. So he has to make sure they completely understand so that they can convey the message correctly. But that was the first thing that just stuck out to me. I just so appreciate the human side of Jesus, and it gives me so much more comfort in knowing, he knows who I am, a person. He knows my struggle. He knows what it's like to be tired, a long day, getting the kids ready for school, coming home, loads of laundry, and you just kind of want to retreat and get away from everybody. And then immediately, once he thinks he has rest, his disciples come to him and he say, teacher, do you not care that we are perishing? And I'm just kind of like, it kind of took me back to the Israelites, kind of like, every time they would get in trouble, they would call on God, like, God, come save us. Like, don't you care that we're perishing? Or don't you care that we're in trouble? And it's just like, Jesus is like, or God is like, you know that I do. Look at the several other times that I've saved you. Look at the several other times that I've cared for you. And it's just like, you've been with Jesus. You've seen him do some miracles so far. You've seen the great teaching that he's done so far. He does the extra work in making sure you understand more than what the crowd knows. And then you're like, hey, Jesus, save us, man. We're perishing while you sleep. And it's just like,
yeah,
if he can heal lepers and surely you'll be okay. It was just, I don't know. Anyways, that was the first thing that popped out to me. So I won't elaborate too much more. What do y'all have to say on that? Or did y'all have anything to say?
Oh, yeah. I loved this parable. I love it. There's so many lessons in it. For one, I noticed in verse 36, it says, and other little boats who are also with him. That's not in any of the other Gospels. That's one line is only in Mark. And it's almost like, that one boat that Jesus was in they weren't the only ones. So the other little boats were the beneficiary of the storms being calmed. You know, so the effect that was on them as well. So they got to relish in that blessing. But what I love about this is that, you know, most of the times we hear, you know, oh, he just had so much faith that he was asleep. He wasn't worried about the storm. And, you know, I've heard that multiple times in sermons. And while that's true, what stood out to me this time was like his creation, because he created everything. His creation, the wind and the waves, does what he tells it to. You know, they're his. They have no mind, no sense. They're inanimate objects. But we who have a mind and a sense, we can discern situations and surroundings, can feel panic and security, and are the true pinnacle of his creation. We choose whether or not we want to do what he says. You know, we choose whether or not to be his. Yet, like this one disciple that goes to him and is like, you know, don't you care that we're perishing? You know, we are the same way. We accuse and expect him to jump up from his peace, from his, you know, his peaceful place at our demands and pleas. And look what he says, you know, then he arose and rebuked the wind and the sea, peace be still, but then rebukes the disciples. Why are you so fearful? How is it that you have no faith? And then I'm like, that's me too. I do that, you know. It's like, oh no, I'm could be facing a cancer diagnosis, or, you know, a loved one dies. Like, Lord, don't you care? You know, be with me, help me. And, you know, what does he say? You know, why are you so fearful? Don't you have any faith? So it's like, oh, I'm sorry. You know, and it's just, it shows his authority over nature. It shows his authority over peace, you know, in chaos. So I just love that.
Yeah. Stephanie?
Yeah, I mean, this is probably, I don't know if I'd say like my favorite account, but it's one of them. When you look at how he responds, which I guess, I mean, I've heard about he had so much faith, but I mean, he's God in the flesh. So
Yeah, that never made sense to me either.
yeah, but I think, I mean, I just think about his humanity and how exhausted. As a mom, not saying that I've been where Jesus is, but I know I've been so exhausted that my kids try to wake me up and it's not happening. And so I'm thinking about how exhausted he would have been to be in a boat, which, I mean, even a storm, like the way that a boat rocks, like we rock a child like that. So even in a mild storm, that would be almost soothing if you didn't know what it was. Not saying that that's necessarily it. But I'm thinking about how tired he is, and they are awake and they are fearful. And the word here, when they wake him up and he talks, which immediately in my mind, what happens is, or what I'm drawn to, is the fact that he didn't address the lack of faith immediately, like I do with my kids. Like, hey, why'd you wake me up? Like, I'm trying, can't you see I'm trying to sleep? And then take care of what? He takes care of this, takes care of the need, and then he goes back gently. I mean, the word that's used there is like a rebuke for what he told, which he rebuked the wind and then he spoke to the sea. And the words that he said, which the ESV has it different than what I see in the interlinear when I look at the Greek, but that word isn't peace, it's silence. And the Greek word for that is the same word that is used where it says that Jesus remained silent through his trial.
Oh.
Which I thought was interesting. But it's an involuntary stillness. When you pair it with the next word, it's an involuntary stillness. So it's not like it had no choice. I mean, it must obey. Like you said, Dee, we don't have, like, we have that choice to obey or not. But then he addresses their fear. And the word for fear there is delos. And it's not just like, I'm afraid. It's like a cowardliness. It's like deeply fearful. And it, to the point of being driven. You are fear driven. Your fear is it's driving you. It's making the decisions for you. And from the dictionary I was using, it said that it's the sense that someone loses their moral fortitude, that they need to serve the Lord in this instance because of their excessive fear of losing something. And it's always used negatively. But when I boil it down to what Jesus is saying here, at least from what I can see, he's saying, like, why are you so driven by your fear when you should be driven by your faith?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a good point. I'm sorry, Stephanie, were you done?
Yeah, I'm done.
Oh, okay. Well, you covered all that, and then I was noticing verse 41, and it says, "And they were filled with great fear, and said to one another, Who then is this that even the wind and the sea obey him?" And it's like, in the beginning, we've established that Jesus has come. He's established his authority, and they've been with him so far, like thus far, and it still seems as if they're kind of on the fence, like, we think we know who he is, but do we really know who he is? And I just think that's so interesting. Like, and I mean, I guess visual. When I read the Bible, I tend to read with a lot of imagination. I'm a grown woman, but I use my imagination quite often. And so I'm just always thinking, about the faces that they're making in this. Like, if I were to put myself in that situation, like, how would that come off? Like, yo, Peter, like, dude, like, this man just calmed the storm. Like, do you know who he is? Like, the wind and the sea obey him. And then I'm just thinking, Peter might respond in some way like, I think I know who he is, but I don't really know. Then that's just how I read it, because it just helps me to understand things. And at the end of the day, if I put myself in the shoes of the apostles, that's how I would view it. Like, whew, this you're around a serious being, somebody who is fully God, who has all the authority. He can just say, "Be still," and the winds will stop. The sea will calm. It's just crazy to think about. It's just a mind blowing thing, and to also think, like, they were in the presence of all of that. That is just, it's wild in my head. So
what I thought was pretty neat is when he addresses them, why are you so fearful? How is it that you have no faith? They were in his presence. Well, he was in their presence. They knew enough to go to him for help, but didn't, like, they were expecting him to start shoveling the water out of the boat too, to be right there along with him. But instead, he did exceedingly and more abundantly, like we studied in Ephesians. He did far more than that. And being in his presence, that's comforting to me, because we're in his presence in his church, and to see that they're still running to him in a panic, and he takes care of them, and I can run to him in a panic, not accusing, but have him take care of my problems.
Yeah, agreed. So let's go ahead and move on to chapter 5 and look at verses 1 through 20. And this is about Jesus heals a man with a demon. What did y'all notice first? Or what did you gather from that particular block of passage?
From 1 through 20, the whole thing?
Yeah, or specific verses. What did you get?
All right, so what I got for verses 1 through 20 is really kind of all over the place as usual. But I did notice in verse 6, which Deep brought this up in the last episode, that when the man that was possessed came, like, they fell, which we find out that it's many demons, that it fell down before him again, which we talked about that being involuntary. Not that they're necessarily worshiping him, but they are, they are subject to his authority and his power. And then I thought what was really interesting is in verse 9, he asks what the name of that demon is. I'm like, why would he ask? But if you keep going, and I don't know that this is necessarily why, but to me it makes sense, because I think about Romans 15:4, where it talks about all things that were written before were written for our learning. And I know that that's talking about Old Testament, but I think that's true for us with New Testament. And we find out that Jesus not only has power to expel a demon, he has the power to expel a legion of demons, which, if we're talking literally, it's very possible that this was a hyperbole. I mean, we that the demon that said that, we don't know that it was a literal legion. A literal legion could be anywhere from 5,400 to 6,000 troops.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's very possible because the swine that were here, the pigs, there were 2,000 of them. So I mean, and even so, the demons would have outnumbered the pigs at that point. But past that, moving past all that, because that's just all really interesting side stuff in my brain. I was really drawn to verse 17, where after the people have come and they've seen him and they have asked him to leave. Or no, that's at the point that they ask him to leave, sorry. That these people, they just see the destruction.
Mm-hmm.
And I think some people here in our time, when they look at Jesus, they see destruction. They see, oh, I can't live the lifestyle I want. I can't be married to who I want. I can't do this. I can't do that. This is going to completely tear up my life. We see that with people that are wanting to convert sometimes when they come to the church and they're thinking about all the things that it's going to do to their life as it is, and they view it as destructive. But really, we know that what Jesus does, if it does tear things apart, is that it's refining, that it's taking the impurities and it's purifying those things, and that the outcome is beautiful and it's something to be highly prized. But when the people in this region saw what happened, they're like, please leave. Like, please, we can't handle this. But this part, sorry, this is the verse I thought I was getting to in my notes. Those verses 18 through 20. When the man begged him to let him come with him, and Jesus says no.
I know.
And I'm like, can you imagine how heartbreaking that would be to beg to be with Jesus and him to say no, which we know that's going to happen in the end for some people. And I really, really don't want to be one of those people.
Yeah.
I was going to say persons, which I guess would work. But sometimes I think, like when I'm praying, especially when times are really hard, I beg Jesus to come. Like, please come to me. Please make this all go away. Please end it all. Like, I'm just done. And Jesus says no. Jesus says, no, I have more that needs to be done. And the whole purpose of that man being told no was that he could proclaim what Jesus had done for us. And the people marveled at that. And I thought, that's what it is in my life too. Like Jesus, you look at Paul in Philippians 1:21 through 26, and he's talking about, to live as Christ, to die as gain. If I stay, it's more work. But if I go, I get to be with Jesus, and that's far better. But for your sake, I know that it would be better for me to stay, and so I know that's what's going to happen. And passages like 1 Corinthians 6:20 and 1 Corinthians 10:31, and I think about Matthew 5:16 that talks about our light and glorifying God through what we do. And I just see all that wrapped up into these tiny little 3 verses right here.
So again, using my imagination, thinking about this man and what he would look like, right? Like he just had to be, and I don't want this to offend anybody, but I think people understand when I say what I say, like he just had to be the crazy. Nobody wanted to be near him. It was just like, you're not going to go through him because, just look at the text and what it says, no one could bind him, not even with a chain. He had often been bound with shackles. But he always wrenched the chains apart and broke the shackles in pieces. So if I'm thinking about shackles, I'm thinking about metal. You know what I mean? Now and I'm assuming that that's what they were used, metal and stuff, because I know they had like people that worked metal and different things like that. I don't think that it would have been wood of any kind. It would all be metal. So the strength that he had to have, you've got to be out of your mind to be able to just have that strength to tear these shackles apart. And it says that he broke the shackles in pieces. No one had the strength to subdue him. And then night and day among the tombs and on the mountains, he was always crying out and cutting himself with stones. So he's got this great amount of strength. He probably looks crazy. He's not a clean person. Nobody wants to go near him. And then on top of that, he's cutting himself. Day after day, night and day, he's cutting himself, and he was always crying out. First of all, if I see something if I walk out this building right now and I see something like that, I'm not even gonna try and bind that person. I'm not even gonna try and help. I'm running the other way. I'm not going anywhere near you. I'm not gonna try and help you because I don't know what's happening. I don't know what's going on, right? And so there's that. Like, just nobody wants to, nobody wants to be bothered with him. People are running in the other direction. Like, he's probably just filthy and bloody because he cuts himself and he's always screaming. And then immediately he sees Jesus and he runs right to Jesus. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And just think about that, though. Where everybody else is kind of running the other way, he sees Jesus. Jesus didn't even have to come to him. He went to Jesus. So I thought that was interesting. But then also, Stephanie, you made the point about how the herdsmen were like, get him out of here or whatever. And I feel like, and maybe I'm a hypocrite for saying it this way, but like, I would have ran the other way, yes. But I do want to believe that I would have sympathy for that man and that some help could have came to him. The herdsmen, all they cared about was their profit. Jesus sent that legion into those pigs, and the pigs went down there and drowned. We got to think those are the herdsmen. That was their money. So they cared more about the pigs and the fact that they've lost money than they do about this human being who clearly needs help.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just thought that was really interesting. Like, and Stephanie, you made some very good points too. How a lot of times the cares of this world will really get us. Like, we can see people in need, but for selfish reasons of our own, we decide, look, I know that person's in need, but man, I gotta get me. I gotta do me. Like, I can't be worried about them and what they got going on, and it's not even showing a form of sympathy whatsoever. So I thought that was.
You brought up a good point about his appearance. And it doesn't say how Jesus reacted to him, except that he obviously heals him, right? But, I mean, think about us. We're that icky, gross, nasty, crying out, crazy person in our sin. We're unapproachable. We're scary, or we're just repulsive. But he wants to heal us. He wants to take the demons out of us. In, like you said, he fell down and worshipped him in verse 6. Like, do we see Jesus from afar in all our grossness and all our nastiness and bloodiness and repulsiveness and fall down and worship him? But I also thought of verse 13. At once Jesus gave them permission, because they asked to go into the swine. He gave them permission. It brought me back to Job 1, when the sons of God were together in God's presence, and even Satan was there. Satan needed permission to do things. They asked permission. They still knew his authority. They understood it. And like you said, Stephanie, how he begged to go with him, but Jesus told him, like, look at the words exactly he uses. He says, go home to your friends and tell them what great things the Lord has done for you and how he has had compassion on you. To me, that sounds like Matthew 28, 19 and 20. Go tell the world, in all our grossness and stuff. And he's healed us and made us well and saved us, like he saved this, demon-possessed man. He tells him the same thing. Go tell the world, and yeah, he may have been disappointed, because I know I would want to go. Like, we want to go to Jesus now, right? Like you said, Jesus, come take me now. But we can't, because Jesus knew, well, I'm assuming this, but Jesus knows the hearts of men. He knew he would go back and just praise him and probably convert him, convert his family and town to him. So I thought that was just wonderful.
Yeah. Dee, I like how you mentioned the authority again, because it reminds us too. And I thought about Job too, and just the fact that, Satan doesn't have authority like we think he does. He doesn't have power like we think he does. We talk like Satan can only get us when we give into our temptations. Other than that, he has no power whatsoever.
Right.
And all authority, he has no authority, because we see it here and we see it in Job. Like, he has to ask permission. Like, God gives Satan permission to mess with Job. Jesus gives this legion permission to go into the pigs. Like, you can't just do what you want to do. Jesus has all authority. And so I think that's a great reminder for us, you know, you can overcome Satan. You can do that. Like, yes, temptations are here. We're humans. And so, yes, we give into that. And we will give into it because we're not perfect. But we only give into what we allow Satan to tempt us with. You know, like we don't just, he doesn't have that kind of power like we think he does. If we're in hell with Satan, it's not because of anything Satan has done. It's what we've allowed him to do, you know? And Jesus has all authority. And if Jesus, you know, even though he walked this earth and he was perfect, like I've always said, and what I love to talk about, that humanity of Jesus, if he can overcome these things, and he's human, so he might still, he still feels the way that we feel and different things like that. If he can overcome those things, so can we. Yeah, so I like what you said about, again, about his authority. Stephanie, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
No, ma'am.
No? What? I felt like this one went by pretty quick. All right, so before we end the podcast, let's ask our question. Starting with you, Stephanie, where do you see the love of Christ?
So, I see the love of Christ in the fact that he approached, or he didn't approach, he allowed the approach from the demon-possessed man. You know, so many people would have just turned and walked away. But like Dee said, we are that person in our sin. And the one person whose presence we would truly offend allows us into his presence in order for that purification. And that's why I see it.
Good job. Or good deal. I mean, you always do a good job. Anyways, Dee, where do you see it?
Well, we covered two different chunks here, and I actually saw it in two different places. I saw it in his soft rebuke to the disciples on the boat. It's almost in his questioning of them that I hear a pleading in his voice, like, I love you, I've got you, don't worry about it, you know, and so I see it there, but then I also see it in when he heals the demon-possessed man, and he says, you know, go and tell what the Lord has done for you. You know, like, look, I love you. I made you whole. Go tell everybody. So that's why I see his love.
Yeah. I see it in the demon-possessed man at the end of chapter, or at the end of verse 19, where Jesus tells him to go home to your friends and tell them how much the Lord has done for you. And then in verse 20 it says, and he went away and began to proclaim in Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him, and everyone marveled. And it just really makes me think of the love of Christ in that way. It's like, I know what God has done for me in my life. I know that he will continue to do for me as long as I continue to walk in his light. And his love should, I won't even say allow me, it should make me want to tell people so much about him and what he has done for me. And I will be honest, I'm not always the best at it, but there are times when something just happens that I thought just never would happen or could happen, and it's in those moments like that, it's like, number one, I know this was nobody but God. I the way that things just worked out in the providence and different things like that, this was nobody but God. And it affirms my faith that much more, my trust and belief in him, because it's like, sometimes you're kind of just going through the motions, and it's just like, I know God's working in my life, but you don't see everything and how it's happening, right? But then when it does happen, all you can do is say, thank you, God. Like, I know this was you. And I kind of feel like that with the demon-possessed man. And then at the end it says, and everyone marveled. Everyone was so shocked. And I think it's little things like that when you tell people, I guess when you quote unquote have a testimony of some sort, and you go and you tell people about what Jesus has done for you, what God has done for you, and how your life could have gone, but by the grace of God it turned out a different way. You're able to share that with other people. And I just think that's such a blessing. And that's that is the love of Christ, to be able to share what he's done with me, with others, what he's done for me and in my life with others, and let other people know, hey, look, you're not far removed from this. Like, you can have this too. This can be you too. So, yeah. All right. Well, to our listeners, we want to say thank you again for joining us today. As always, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to contact us. We would love to study with you or connect you with someone local. We hope you will seek to know the love of Christ in your own life, as always. And until next time, bye.
Bye. You can reach out to us on Facebook or Instagram. We would love to hear from you. And be sure to click like and share this episode with family and friends. In doing so, you're sharing the love of Christ.